Hey everybody, my name is Gavin Kennedy, and today I will be presenting my research on IMAPS and DNS configuration with hardening. This presentation will focus on understanding how these protocols work, how they can be configured in both Linux and Windows environments, and how to apply the hardening practices to secure them. So for this presentation, we will follow the agenda. First, I will go over the overview of the main project objectives. Then I will introduce the IMAP protocol and configuration through Dovecoat. And then I will do an overview of DNS protocol and the configuration through IIS and bind. And then I will do hardening recommendations for both IMAPS and DNS. And then lastly, I will do verification steps and then a closing summary. So for the project that we're doing, there are some objectives. The first being to research and configure IMAPS using the Dovecoat mail server on the Linux host that will ensure that it is listening on port 993. Then to configure DNS servers using IIS on Windows and bind on Linux, ensuring that both of them listen on port 53. And then to apply at least 3 hardening techniques to each service to strengthen their security. And then lastly, to do a Nmap scan to verify both the IMAPs and the DNS were responding correctly and their respective default ports. And all these objectives are designed to demonstrate a understanding of both the service setup and the fundamental hardening practices in system administration. All right, so what is IMAPS? IMAPS, or Internet Message Access Protocol Secure, is the encrypted form of IMAP, and it is used for retrieving email messages from a server. And it operates under port 993 and uses a SSL or TLS encryption to securely communicate between clients and the email server. The IMAPS protocol ensures that all the transmitted email content is remain protected against any interception. And in our setup for our servers, Dovecoat is used as the IMAP service on Linux, and this focuses solely on confirming that the service was securely listening on port 993 and not enabling a full email sending or receiving functionality. So to configure Dovecoat for IMAPS, the service can be installed using the sudo apt install dovecat impd command. And within the configuration directory, there are several parameters that need to be set. So first would be to enable the IMAP by setting the protocols equal IMAP, and then to require the encryption by setting the SSL to required, and then also to specify the SSL certificate and key paths. And then after saving any of the configurations, just go and restart the service using the sudo systemctl restart dovecoat, and then verify that it is working by running the nmap scan. And then as long as the scan confirms it's on port 993 and that it is open, then Dovecoat is properly configured and it is ready to handle a securely handled IMAPS connection. So hardening Dovecoat will improve the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the mail service. Some hardening tips that I would recommend would first to enforce the TLS and disable the plaintext authentication. And this will ensure that the login credentials cannot be transmitted without encryption. The second would be to restrict the network access, and this will only allow the trusted IP addresses or networks to connect, typically managed through the firewall rules. And then lastly would be to implement the fail to ban and monitors authenticating logs for repeated failed attempts and temporarily bans the source IP to prevent any brute force attacks. And all of these measures are to help minimize the exposure and reduce the likelihood of any successful exploitation. All right, so now I'm going to go over DNS. So what is DNS? It stands for the Domain Name System, and it translates human-readable domain names into machine-readable IP addresses. It serves as the cornerstone of the network communication. Typically, it operates under port 53 and supports both UDP and TCP traffic, depending on the type of query or data size. For our project, DNS is configured using the IIS on Windows and bind on Linux. And the purpose is to limit the confirming DNS was active and listening on the default port, and not actually to create operational domain controllers or perform any active zone transfers. All right, and here's just a little tidbit on how to install and test these. So for Windows with IIS DNS, you would go to the DNS server role that can be added using the PowerShell tool. So just install Windows Feature DNS, include management tools command, and then you want to create a simple lookup zone such as like example.com and just use it for testing. And then for any port validation, you can use the nstat in and then make sure that the port is open. Um, and then for Linux, you want to install bind9 by using the sudo apt install bind9 command, and then go ahead and configure it to make sure it is listening on all the interfaces, allow the queries for specific networks and addresses as needed, and then disable any recursion for security purposes. And then make sure to restart it by using the sudo systemctl restart bind9 command, and then go ahead and do an nmap scan afterwards to make sure that the port is open. And both configurations will confirm that the DNS is listening properly as expected on their default port. All right, so DNS servers, because as I said before, they are kind of the cornerstone of network communication, they can end up being high target value in terms of like attacks. So it's pretty important that you would harden them. So first, I'm going to start with ISS. Um, First hardening tip I would recommend is disable any recursion, and this will prevent the server from acting as a open resolver. And protecting it would be to protect it from any misuse in any amplification attacks. Second would be to restrict the zone transfers. So limiting transfers to any trusted secondary servers would reduce data exposure and the potential risk of spoofing. And lastly would be to regularly patch and detail the logging, and this would ensure the DNS software would remain secure from any known vulnerabilities and provide visibility in suspicious or unauthorized activity. All right, and now let's look at bind and how that can be hardened on Linux. First, bind should be run with limited permissions using dedicated non-root account. This would isolate the service from the rest of the system, so if the DNS process is compromised, then the attacker can't gain full access to the administrative access. Second would be recursion should always be disabled unless it's absolutely required. So recursive lookups allow the DNS server to query other servers into a tool for DNS application attacks. So disabling it would help ensure the server only answers for its own configured zones. And then lastly, zone transfers should be restricted to specific trusted IP addresses. So DNSSEC should be enabled to sign and validate DNS data. This combination prevents unauthorized replication of DNS information and ensures that the responses are authentic and haven't been tampered with. All right, and this is just another little tidbit. So verification to make sure that the ports are running properly. This ensures the configurations are completed successfully and the services are responding as expected. Um, Really, both of these, you just need to run Nmap scans. So for IMAP, it would be port 993, and then as long as it shows open, then the service is listening. And then same thing for DNS, just port 53. As long as that's open, then you know it's responding. Um, and then in terms of our lab, just screenshots and then shows that it works. All right, so to wrap things up, this presentation covered two essential network services, being IMAPS and DNS, and how to configure and harden them for better security. For IMAPS, the focus was on enabling secure connections through Dovecoat on Linux, enforcing encryption, and applying measures such as disabling plaintext logins and limiting the access to trusted systems. And for DNS, both IIS and bind setups were discussed, along with the key hardening sets, such as disabling recursion, uh, restricting zone transfers, and enabling logging and DNSSEC for integrity. All right, and that is it. Thank you.